Deuteronomy chapter 2 and chapter 3, verse 1 to 11. The lessons to be learned from this battle. The calm faith of their leader inspired the people with confidence in God. They trusted all to his omnipotent arm, and he did not fail them. Not mighty giants, nor walled cities, armed hosts, nor rocky fortresses could stand before the captain of the Lord's host. The Lord led the army. The Lord discomfited the enemy. The Lord conquered in behalf of Israel. The giant king and his army were destroyed. The Israelites soon took possession of the whole country. Thus was blotted from the earth that strange people who had given themselves up to iniquity and abominable idolatry. In the conquest of Gilead and Bashan, there were many who recalled the events which nearly 40 years before had in Kadesh doomed Israel to the long desert wandering. They saw that the report of the spies concerning the promised land was in many respects correct. The cities were walled and very great, and were inhabited by giants, in comparison with whom the Hebrews were mere pygmies, dwarfs. But they could now see that the fatal mistake of their fathers had been in distrusting the power of God. This alone had prevented them from at once entering the goodly land. When they were at the first preparing to enter Canaan, the undertaking was attended with far less difficulty than now. God had promised his people that if they would obey his voice, he would go before them and fight for them. And he would also send hornets to drive out the inhabitants of the land. The fear of the nation had not been generally aroused, and little preparation had been made to oppose their progress. But when the Lord now bade Israel go forward, they must advance against alert and powerful foes, and must contend with large and well-trained armies that had been preparing to resist their approach. In their contest with Og and Sihon, the people were brought to the same test beneath which their fathers had so signally failed. But the trial was now far more severe than when God had commanded Israel to go forward. The difficulties in their way had greatly increased since they refused to advance when bidden to do so in the name of the Lord. It is thus that God still tests his people, and if they fail to endure the trial, he brings them again to the same point, and the second time the trial will come closer and be more severe than the preceding. This is continued until they bear the test, or if they are still rebellious, God withdraws his light from them and leaves them in darkness. The Hebrews now remembered how once before, when their forces had gone to battle, they had been routed and thousands slain. But they had then gone in direct opposition to the command of God. They had gone out without Moses, God's appointed leader, without the cloudy pillar, the symbol of the divine presence, and without the ark. But now Moses was with them, strengthening their heart with words of hope and faith. The Son of God, enshrined in the cloudy pillar, led the way, and the sacred ark accompanied the host. This experience has a lesson for us. The mighty God of Israel is our God. In him we may trust. And if we obey his requirements, he will work for us in as signal a manner as he did for his ancient people. Everyone who seeks to follow the path of duty will at times be assailed by doubt and unbelief. The way will sometimes be so barred by obstacles apparently insurmountable as to dishearten those who will yield to discouragement. But God is saying to such, go forward, do your duty at any cost. The difficulties that seem so formidable that fill your soul with dread will vanish as you move forward in the path of obedience, humbly trusting in God. Deuteronomy chapter 2 and chapter 3, verse 1 to 11. We are nearing the day of God's great final review, when the people of this world must stand before the judge of all the earth to answer for their deeds. We are now in the time of investigation. Before the day of God's review, every character will have been investigated, every case decided for eternity. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 30 to verse 40. When thou art in tribulation, and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days, if thou turn to the Lord thy God, and shall be obedient unto his voice. For Jehovah thy God is a merciful God. He will not fail thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers which he sware unto them. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before thee, since the day that God created man upon the earth, and from the one end of heaven unto the other, whether there hath been any such thing as this great thing is, or hath been heard like it? Did ever a people hear the voice of God speaking out of the midst of the fire, as thou hast heard and live? Or has God essayed to go and take him a nation from the midst of another nation, by trials, by signs, and by wonders, and by war, and by a mighty hand, and by an outstretched arm, and by great terrors, according to all that Jehovah your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? Unto thee it was showed, that thou mightest know that Jehovah, he is God. There is none else beside him. Out of heaven he made thee to hear his voice, that he might instruct thee. And upon earth he made thee to see his great fire. And thou heardest his words out of the midst of the fire, and because he loved thy fathers, therefore he chose their seed after them, and brought thee out with his presence, with his great power, out of Egypt, to drive out nations from before thee, greater and mightier than thou, to bring thee in, to give thee their land for an inheritance, as at this day. Know therefore this day, and lay it to thy heart, that Jehovah, he is God in heaven above, and upon the earth beneath. There is none else. And thou shalt keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee this day, that it may go well with thee, and with thy children after thee, and that thou mayest prolong thy days in the land which Jehovah thy God giveth thee forever. Deuteronomy 4, verses 30 to 40. Every case decided for eternity.